what you read and what you study in your science classes and everything, I think you'll have to admit that we're in the midst of either a mega trend right now or a true climate change. And it's manifests itself, or it shows itself. It's proof that it is here by the large amount of rainfall that we're receiving now in certain times, and the long periods we go in between rainfalls, which basically are certain types of droughts. The large amount of wind, how windy it has become, and all of these different things. So we've moved to this protected culture, which allows us to stay out of that wind and stay out of the hail, which comes with all these thunderstorms that occur in what we'll call episodic events or large events. So you don't go out and just get a little bit of rain sometimes. So we get 4 or 5 inches, and it's enough to cause a lot of damage. But under this type of cover, we can eliminate that, as well as we can water more effectively, use a lot less water than if we're watering overhead, like you sprinkle your lawn outside. We actually have to do narrow strips only, where we'll have the plants. In those narrow strips, you can see these long strips of plastic here. We have these long strips of plastic where we plant only on the plastic and we only water underneath the plastic. So it's very conservation oriented in the way of water preservation, and water is a very, very precious resource. And your generation is going to be charged with managing these water resources in the future. And you're going to find that I know Minnesota says on that license plate, we're the land of 10,000 lakes and a lot of rivers and everything. And we have a lot of water here, but we can't take advantage of it. We can't abuse it. We have to be very careful how we use our water. And
Gary, I'm gonna interrupt you. I agree completely. We have to be careful how we use your water, but we have a couple questions about the structure that you're in. So I wanted to make sure we could ask those. So first of all, so the students are curious, how big is the greenhouse that you're in, and what is it covered with? Is it plastic or glass?
It's this is not really, I won't call it, Sue. Let's refer to this as a high tunnel. This structure is 500 feet long and approximately 24 feet wide. And it is covered with a special type of plastic that has a ultraviolet inhibitor in it. In other words, it's like a little bit of shade material within this plastic. So everybody probably knows what it's like to walk underneath or into a greenhouse, how warm it can be. This helps the temperatures stay moderate. And we talk about high tunnels. Let's refer to that as covered structure that really doesn't have extra heat. The only heat we have here is what we'll call passive solar heat.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Jerry. There's another question about the soil, and I know that was something that you wanted to talk about a lot. They're curious, is this special soil, or was this just what was on the ground on your land when you started farming?
You know, this farm that we're on here right now, we have been farming here for about 35 years, and this is sandy soil. It has generally quite low organic matter, if you understand that. But we amend this soil. We've made this soil much richer than it was when we started. And as you can see with this picture, that this has the ability to actually hold water and to hold root structure and to eliminate a lot of drought, as long as we apply water regularly. And that'll allow us to move into an area of compost when you're done with your questions here, Sue.
Yeah, let's do that. That was the last question for now, but don't forget, classrooms, if you have questions you want to ask Jerry, use the Q&A. But let's talk about compost. I think you had some samples or wanted to share some insight into that with us.
Yes, I really do want to talk about compost. We are talking about things that we add to the soil to make the soil better and the soil richer. and to feed the plants better. And yet we try to use as many natural ingredients as we can. And so we're kind of in the business of making a lot of compost. And whether you make it here on the farm or in your backyard, compost is really just a byproduct of natural organic or inorganic combinations of products that go through the I want to say the spoiling process, or the process where we're trying to commute and make the soils that we want to make. So we're basically blending products here all season long, basically old hay, old corn stalks, and we mix it with a bunch of cow poop, and we grind it up, and we put it out in the field, and then we water it with some regularity to keep the decomposition process going. And what it yields is this product I'm going to dump out of this bucket right now, and this is humus. This is compost that's very, very high in organic matter. You can see it in the forms of the little twigs, in forms of the roots, in forms of soil. And this has a little bit of nutrient in it, and it helps the plants live, and it helps the plants thrive naturally. So it's part of our management process that we mix some of this compost every year with the soils that we have. We call it amending, A-M-E-N-D-I-G, amending the soils. We're actually increasing the fertility, we're increasing the organic matter, we're increasing the ability to hold moisture, and generally, naturally, allowing plants to flourish without an awful lot of chemical fertilizer, although we do soil tests regularly just to see just exactly where we're at, and we do amend occasionally with things that compost doesn't have in it, like a lot of things like nitrogen and things like that.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. That compost that's quite a visual change. We do have a question from Marley in Miss Molly's class. She said, or she is wondering, you mentioned cow poop is added to that compost. Do you raise animals on your farm or just plants?
You know, we actually do have animals on our farm too. And one of the main reasons we have beef cattle on our farm is for the byproduct, which is manure. And we need to use our own manure because we need to feed those cattle a forage that is low in chemical herbicides. We don't want to use hay or grass or other products that have been sprayed with chemicals that are resistant and have a high resistance to decomposition. In other words, they stay within that organic hay and the other products we're using. And we've had a problem in the past of buying this product and getting a contaminated product that you won't find. You'll have it in your compost, still makes beautiful compost, but when you spread the compost, you'll notice the next year that your plants aren't growing, and oftentimes, many times, totally fail. So that's why we have animals on our farm.
Awesome. So Miss Biss's class is wondering, how long does it take that transformation to happen from just the stalks and kind of the raw materials to the compost that you can use?
It takes us about 1 year to do it. It can be done faster than that, but we've chosen to do it this way because we haven't got the manpower to do it faster.
Sure. Okay, here's a question from Mila. She's in Morris, Minnesota, Miss Greenwald's class. She's curious, how many high tunnels do you have?
Well, that's a good question. I can't really tell you how many high tunnels exactly we have, but I can tell you the square footage of area that we cover. And then altogether, it's about 40 acres. But I don't want people to be overwhelmed with that. I want all of you students to realize that I started with one high tunnel 35 years ago, one little high tunnel in the backyard of the house I live in. And it was a little 10-foot wide by 50-foot high tunnel. The idea I got from farmers in Europe, And that's what they were doing. And nobody in Minnesota at the time was doing it. So we started with that, and gradually we've grown them. We realize now that little high tunnels don't work so well for us because they're hard to get equipment in. And so we build bigger ones now where we can actually drive a tractor through them. But so we have about 40 acres, and they're all different sizes. They go all the way from 12 feet wide to 24 feet wide, and from 80 feet long to 500 feet long.
Excellent. Thanks, Jerry. So time is flying. We're already about 10:15, so we have about 15 minutes remaining. Did you, could we walk and look at some of those other high tunnels and some of the things growing in them?
I'd love to do that. So let's walk over and see some of these smaller high tunnels that we first started with many years ago. These are probably of the age, they're probably 20 some years old. Constantly revamping them and rebuilding them, and what they do is allow us to harvest crops a little bit earlier in the spring. Come on in, Jessica. And to harvest them later into the fall. In the spring, because we can prevent the crops from freezing in here, and by heating up the soils and the soil mass. And in the fall, it works just in reverse, but we can also keep these crops warmer at night. And so we can probably go maybe 2 weeks longer than your average frost. So if you have an average frost of the 20th of September, which is about normal for this latitude, we can probably keep these tomatoes and things producing until, the 4th or 5th, somewhere in there in October.
Excellent. Okay, so these are some tomatoes. I think I see a little bloom right there. So tell us about how many tomatoes you grow. And Caleb is wondering, how do you harvest produce in these high tunnels?
Okay, well, those are good questions. We harvest these. We'll start harvesting these tomatoes probably 2 or 3 weeks earlier than the tomatoes that our students that we're speaking to have in their gardens. And this is due to the fact that we're keeping it warm all the time, and we've got tomatoes in the ground right now. And if you don't have cover, if you don't have protection, you don't want to have your tomatoes in the ground yet. I want to emphasize that I think the 3rd week of May is a great time to plant your tomato plants. But we're always pushing the envelope, and we're allowed to do so by what we have here. So can you refresh me on a little bit more of that question?
Harvesting. How do you harvest produce in these high tunnels?
Okay, well, those are good questions. Actually, it's the old-fashioned way. We harvest everything by hand on this farm. Everything we do, from tomatoes to green beans to watermelons to cantaloupes to pumpkins to sweet corn, it's all done by hand. And this is kind of old-fashioned style, but what it does is delivers just a spectacularly high-quality product. These tomatoes aren't picked until they're ripe. Red ripe is what I'm talking about. Juicy, red, full of flavor. And they're totally different than most of the tomatoes you get the rest of the year in the store, where they're harvested green. They expose them to ethylene gas to help them and trick them into turning red. But they can't bring the sugar on board. So we do everything by hand here to try to utilize the best product we can. Jessica, did you get a chance to show a little bit of the floral aspect of this? We've got some, this is very interesting here. I just wanted, as a side note, that these are the blossoms on these tomatoes, and they're already blooming. And of course, when you have flowers and you have a plant that needs to be pollinated, you need something to pollinate them. And normally the wind will do a good job with tomatoes, but there is no wind inside here. So we bring bumblebees into these tunnels, and the bumblebees do all of that work for us that we used to do by hand with either feathers or lath sticks or with power blowers. So it's quite interesting, just emphasizing how important bees are to us.
Yeah, definitely. So we had a question from one of our YouTube viewers. And if you're joining us from YouTube, please use the comment section to ask any questions. They're curious why you use the black plastic underneath the plants.
Oh, the black plastic?
Yes.
Okay. I can't hear you too well, but here, what was the question about the black plastic? Why we use it?
Why do you use it?
Okay. The first reason that we use it is because of warmth. It does help to warm the soil. Second reason, it helps when you're watering these plants to keep the water in the root zone only, and we try to avoid the evaporation factor. So we only need half as much water if we're doing that. And the last reason is weed control. I like going out to my garden, but I would rather pick my tomatoes instead of having to spend the first half hour pulling all the weeds around the tomato plant. So we cut down on the weeds here. And basically the only weeds we have in a row like this, I'll have Jessica pull down on the root zone here, and you can see we have a few little weeds, but when they're small like this, we just go down once every couple of weeks and pull them out of there. And they're very easy to manage. And the rest of this surface area all around here is basically impervious to weed growth. So it's, I don't know if you call it lazy man's way of farming. I would call it the intelligent farmer's way of farming.
I think I would agree, Jerry. Work smarter, not harder is a saying I've heard my grandfather use. So why don't we go to the next high tunnel? And I think as we're walking, we have a video of seed planting from your Facebook page that we're going to show. So yep, here we go. We're going to watch this video and then we'll see you in the next high tunnel. So viewers, if you can see in the tray on the left-hand side, there's seeds, and then they're using this machine to take them out of that tray and to put them in the soil. And you can see that they pick them up and then just drop them in. So I think Jerry would share this is another way that they're really trying to work smart and intelligent and use equipment and tools so that they can have a really fantastic harvest or produce that they're able to grow. So let's go back. I see we have lots of awesome questions. You guys, please keep sharing those. I don't know if we'll get to answer all of them, but hopefully most of them. All right, Jerry, I think we're back with you. We're traveling to another one of the high tunnels. And viewers, if you remember, if we added all of the land underneath these high tunnels, it would be about 40 acres. An acre is about the size of a football field. So if you could imagine 40 football fields, that's how much land that they're using to grow this produce. And yeah, we'll get some more questions. It's just really windy. If you guys have been outside, you know it's very windy out today and it's just hard to hear and talk. That wind, but we're going to travel down to another one of the high tunnels, and you can see there's lots of different ones on their farm. And Untiedt is a farm near Waverly, Minnesota, which is just kind of west of the Twin Cities area. And we'll ask Jerry, that'll be one of the first things we ask him when we get together back when we have sound. Where can we buy this produce? Because gosh, I don't know about you, but when he was describing those tomatoes, I was getting really hungry. They sounded quite delicious. So here we go. This looks like the tunnel that we're going into. So there we go.
Here we go.
Jerry, we're back with you. So tell us what we're seeing here in this high tunnel.
Certainly, this basically is more of a greenhouse type setting, Sue. As you can see here, we've got heaters in this because we need to keep the temperatures at certain areas. Underneath a lot of these floors here, we have in-ground heat, so we can heat these flats from the bottom, and we'll grow them in here until they're basically ready to go out into the field. At which time we'll pull them and transplant them into the ground. Now what we're looking here is at some cauliflower, and this is really not too far away from being ready to go into the field. As you can see, it pulls out of the flat, and that's where we seeded it into. You can see all the nice roots. Does that come through clear?
Yes, we can see that really well. Yep, we can see all those roots growing.
Okay, and so we'll take these by hand again, and we'll plant them out in the fields, in the rows, into beds like we've seen. So we start them in these greenhouses. We don't necessarily raise much cauliflower in high tunnels. We do our first two plantings are in high tunnels because they're so early. But after that, we moved to open ground, in what I'll call open ground, or out in the field production. Some of the other crops we do that with are onions. We have a lot of different kinds of onions here. And some of these are a lot of different sizes here, but again, they pull, you can see the roots here. And we have a very, very good root ball here. And these will be going into the field in the near term too. This is a crop that can withstand the cold. So we're not really too concerned about the cold nights. And as I looked at the weather forecast this morning, we've got some more very low 30s coming here this week, which would mean you don't want to put your peppers or your warm type crops outside. But onions are a great thing that can go outside. We grow some potatoes. Those potatoes, they do very well outside in this type of weather. We're getting going on planting some sweet corn, waiting basically for these forecasted temperatures in the 70s, which the meteorologists claim are coming this week. So we're going to plant a little bit of sweet corn this week, try to get ahead. But the tomatoes and the peppers and the cantaloupes and our pumpkin transplants and all those different things, they'll need to wait till that third week or a little bit later in May. Let's walk over to the next greenhouse and we'll talk about tomatoes for a little bit here.
That would be great. And maybe if we're able to chat a little bit, Maria is curious, Jerry, what are all of the fruits and vegetables that you grow and which do you grow the most of? I guess he's muted right now, so we'll wait, Maria, to get that answer. But thank you guys for all of the questions that you're putting in. Like I said, I'm not sure we'll have time to answer all of them, but I appreciate your interest and everything that you're curious about.
Okay.
Hey, Jerry, we have a couple students and their classes who are curious where we can buy your tomatoes, because you made them sound very delicious when we were in that first that high tunnel where we saw the tomatoes growing.
So thank you. Basically, probably one of the better places to buy them would be at Kowalski's stores. We raise all of their summertime tomatoes for Kowalski's. Many different kinds of tomatoes. We raise heirloom tomatoes, which are old fashioned. That's the type that a lot of our students, grandparents and great grandparents started with before hybrids became the rage. But Kowalski's is a great place. A lot of markets around the Twin Cities, like the Minneapolis Farmers Market, we're there 6 days a week. And we do specialty stores like Jerry's of Edina and some of the Jerry's stores around the Twin City area also.
Excellent. Okay, I think that you had showed us before the students joined about how you graft tomatoes. So if you could, I think these are all tomatoes. If you want to explain that process, I think that would be really interesting.
I would be flattered to show you this. This is a technique that we stumbled on probably 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. And it's a process where we germinate the seed and then we'll germinate another seed of a plant that has a root which is resistant to a lot of the diseases that we struggle with. So we will take these plants and we'll cut the plant off, leaving us the root, which we throw away, and the top, what's called cyan, that has all that good flavor and all the things you look for in a tomato. And then we'll affix a different rootstock onto the base of this plant and plant this clip here that you can see and leave it on there for several weeks, and they'll grow together. And what this does for us is it gives us a plant which is very, very healthy. It's resistant to fusarium, verticillium, many different kinds of soil diseases that normally we would have to use chemicals to treat. But we do not have to do that when we're using these rootstocks off of these plants. And these roots come off special tomatoes. Many of these, this one is grown on a rootstock called Maxi Fort. And this variety of tomato rootstock actually comes from the jungles of Central America. It's a member of the tomato family. It produces a little tomato about the size of a grape, but it's not really edible. It's bitter and not, but what it does have is a root and a plant health that can help us fight off all of these diseases that are prevalent in our gardens and in our tunnels and in our fields. So we've gone to grafting all the tomatoes we grow each year, which is somewhere past 50,000 plants. And so it's a great way to go. Takes a lot of planning, obviously a lot of money, because you need to plant 3 seeds to get 1. And you'll say, well, normally you should plant 2 to get 1. But what happens is a certain amount of these don't make it. There's just too much stress when you cut a plant in half. It would be you'd like cutting the leg off a calf and taking the leg from another calf and trying to put it back on. Not everyone's going to work. And that's the way it is in the plant kingdom and with tomatoes. And we've also experimented with grafting peppers, and we also use some grafted watermelons. And basically it's because of the vigor that it instills in the plant, the resistance to the diseases, and the general hardiness of the crop in general by using that graft. And that graft is been around for a very long time, but it's something new in Minnesota.
Yeah, well, that sounds fascinating. A lot of work and a lot of science involved in those tomatoes. So Jerry, our time is almost up, but I have 2 final questions that I want to ask you. The first one is from Miss Bertrand's class. They are curious to know how many people work on your farm and if your family members are involved.
Oh, yes. I'll go to the family part first. I described earlier how we're a first-generation farm. Well, we've already, since we've been going at this for 50 some years, we've moved into the 2nd generation. I have 2 daughters and 2 wonderful son-in-laws that work with us on the farm. And then I also have a grandson that who has begun, well, I won't say has begun. He's 24 years old, but he's been working in this operation since he's been 4 years old. So he might know more about a lot of it than I do. But so yes, we have a lot of family members. As far as other employees, on the farm itself, we have probably 120 workers, 130 workers that work every day out in the fields, harvesting and packing all these crops and delivering these crops. And then we have another group of employees that works in our retail sector of the business, which means they're selling the flowers we raise. We didn't touch on that, but we do raise a lot of flowers also because it allows us to get started earlier in the spring and develop early cash flow. So yes, it's a family operation all the way, Sue.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Okay, this is our final question, and this has been asked from several classrooms. What is your favorite part about being a farmer?
Oh, I think my goal and my heart has always been trying to provide something for people who don't have what they really need in their lives. And we do a lot of work growing extra crops and extra yields and packing extra products for feeding the hungry. And I think that's probably where this farm's greatest passion is. We loaded something in excess of 300,000 pounds last year that went directly to food shelves and then into the food stream. So I think that's one of the most important and fascinating things, along with getting up every morning and watching just the miracle of growth occur, all the way from the seeds germinating to the plants growing, to the plants pollinating, to the plants yielding these wonderful fruits. And we've been able to move these high quality products into the main street all around the United States. We do such fun things as we grow all the corn for the Minnesota State Fair, for instance. So I think most of you students probably have had or will have a chance to stop down and have an ear of corn. I think you'll find that it's hopefully some of the finest sweet corn you've ever eaten.
Well, I It definitely is mine. I've had many ears of corn at the state fair. So Jerry, thanks so much for taking time. I know this is a really busy time of year for you. And we appreciate the time you took to show us around and tell us about all of your growing practices. And students and teachers, thank you for joining us to learn a little bit more about how vegetables and different things are grown throughout our state. So I want everyone to have a fantastic first day of May. And hopefully those meteorologists are telling the truth, Jerry, and we have some great weather this week for everyone to get out and enjoy it. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great Monday.